Really excited to be here. This is my first SciPy, and I'm very, very honored to be able to talk to you today about a thing that's very near and dear to my heart, governance, and talking about that in the context of Wikipedia. And governance is one of those words that we often only use whenever things aren't going well or things are broken. And so this talk is sort of at a high level an encouragement to sort of let's think about that in a long-term sense. Let's think about and sort of learning some lessons from Wikipedia's sort of exponential growth phase when they started to add sort of more and more contributors each month, how they sort of tackled that project and sort of maybe lessons that I think can compare to open source software as well. Wait. Just click that there. Okay, so who am I, and why am I sort of standing in front of you now? I'm actually not a programmer or a data scientist. I'm an ethnographer, a social scientist who studies science and technology. And what that means as an ethnographer, a couple of things. It means that I use a variety of methods to study cultures, and that includes a lot of my things that I was trained in my PhD were very qualitative, things like interviews, observational studies, case studies, historical analyses. But I've been doing a lot of work sort of around surveys and even more sort of data science methods as well since I've joined the Berkeley Institute for Data Science in January. And being an ethnographer also means that I'm embedded in the communities that I study. And that's an important part of how I sort of make my findings and sort of seek out questions and get directed towards new sort of things that I'm finding and interested in. My specific focus has been on how cultures make knowledge. So in my PhD and my master's program, I did a lot of work on Wikipedia. I'll be talking about today, and other sort of related free culture projects. And then in my postdoc, which I started in January, I began to be focused on scientific research, data science, and open source scientific software. That's all of you. And so I'm very interested in as well. I'm seeing a lot of parallels between some of the stuff that I've been studying for a while in one context, and then also this new domain as well. So I'd be really excited to, if this resonates with anything that you're going on in your projects, I'd love to talk to you more about it and sort of think about maybe some research that we could do together on that. Now, my PhD work in Wikipedia, as I said before, I'm very embedded in the communities that I study, and I spent a long time, 8 years, in the Wikipedia community doing a lot of work that Wikipedians do. I've worked on over 1,300 different pages. I've made about over 3,000 edits or sort of kind of commits to different pages. Spent hundreds of hours on sort of vandal patrol. That's a particular task that Wikipedians have to do, kind of like code review. I've interviewed a lot of Wikipedians. I attend meetups. I've worked at the Wikimedia Foundation for 3 months, although a lot of that was under a non-disclosure agreement. I've read countless I've lurked a lot, basically, and then ran a lot of descriptive statistics as well, which I'm going to be showing you today. And I'm going to show you one set of graphs in particular that illustrates what happened in Wikipedia when a whole lot of people started to come in. And it's a graph that's often known among Wikipedians as the oh shit graph, depending on which side of the graph you're on. So this is a graph of the number of active contributors to Wikipedia. On the top, that is users making at least 5 edits a month in that given month. The bottom is users making at least 100 edits a month. And you can see there's sort of an exponential growth. Wikipedia starts to, around 2003, enter a phase where basically every year they're about an order of magnitude larger each year. And this is also plotted. You can plug this logarithmically to sort of see the scale on that. The data is not one that I collected. It's data that Eric Zacte collected, but I did plot this, as apparently one does here. It's in a Jupyter notebook running pandas and matplotlib, and it's up on GitHub, so you can view that as well. And what you can see is, Wikipedia started to have around, I don't have a pointer, but you can see that this really started to change the community dynamics. When you go from having 10 active contributors to 100 to 1,000 to 5,000, it sort of starts to change what's going on. And one of the things in Wikipedia it experiences is a dramatic sort of graduation between who actually does the work in Wikipedia, kind of a funnel effect. So approximately 28 million people have registered a Wikipedia account. 6 million have made at least one edit. And then it starts to go down and in sequence from there. The top 5%, so that's about 30,000 people, and this is for the English language Wikipedia, have made almost 3/4 of all edits to articles. And the top 1%, under 5,000 people, have made almost half of all edits to articles. And so one of the things that I want to talk about today in relation to how this affects the governance of the project whenever you're governing at this particular scale, as well as this sort of an age-old question about how people learn how to become members of a community. How do people go from that 28 million or how do people go from the 1 billion people who read Wikipedia to the 28 million to the 6 million to the 30,000 to the 5,000? And where do you lose people along the way? So the story that I want to tell today focuses around, starts around 2005, 2006, when Wikipedia really starts to grow up. And it does this it has a bunch of external and internal factors that lead to this. Some of the external factors include basically Wikipedia gets popular. A lot of people start reading it. It gets major mass media coverage in places like the BBC and the New York Times. Before, Wikipedia was sort of posted on places like Slashdot, and it got a particular group of people who were from a lot of whom were from the open source software community as well. But instead, Wikipedia starts to get a much broader group of people who are coming at a faster and faster rate. And then people, because Wikipedia is being read more, as well as growing in content, people start to care about Wikipedia's accuracy. You have a study commissioned by the journal Nature, which is very rare for Nature to commission a study, comparing the accuracy of Wikipedia articles with Encyclopedia Britannica. You have the Siegenthaler incident, where you have the editor-in-chief of the USA Today finds out that for 4 months his Wikipedia article has accused him of being involved in the JFK assassination, which, since he was one of the pallbearers at JFK's funeral, that hit really close to home for him. He wrote a scathing op-ed, decrying Wikipedia. And some of you might be familiar with Stephen Colbert's Wikiality segment, in which he lampoons Wikipedia and then invites his readers to sort of go in and add as many false facts as possible to it. Made things really crazy for a while, and he continues to do that a little bit. So there's also a lot of internal factors as well, big milestones that happen around this time as Wikipedia starts to develop. You have the first global Wikimania conference, which feels a lot like SciPy, to be very honest. It's a very similar feel. The Wikimedia Foundation officially incorporates as a nonprofit organization, starts to hold those fundraisers that many of you are probably familiar with, raises $100,000, which is also small peanuts compared to what they have today, but it was major for them at the time. And they have more and more intense editorial controversies among their own members. As more and more people are editing Wikipedia, pretty much every social and political, ideological conflict that exists on the planet Earth gets transported into Wikipedia as well, because there's an article about every particular topic. And so the amount of work that has to be done is going up as well, not just sort of work writing articles, but work resolving the inevitable conflicts that are starting to happen as people from all over the globe are trying to write one single encyclopedia, and this is the English language version, about topics like evolution or creationism or George W. Bush or sort of evolution. So. This is a photo of Jimmy Wales at the second annual Wikimania convention. Jimmy Wales, the co-founder of Wikipedia, its benevolent dictator for a long time, its bust factor of one person for a long time. And what he decides to talk about are sort of identifying and eliminating trolls. And this is something that, it's very difficult often. You have a lot of new people coming in. How do you separate good faith contributors who might sort of stir up some trouble and raise legitimate issues that you should deal with people who you can really safely ignore? That's sort of a big problem that Wikipedians have to deal with. And they have to sort of deal with this major ideological conflict as well about what they are as a community. And it sort of goes into this thing about, is it a wiki or is it a pedia? Something inherent into the name. Is it something that anyone can edit, a radically decentralized organization that sort of does away with traditional leadership and traditional centralization, where anyone can come in and do anything they want? Or is it a high-quality reference work, something that people can look at and trust and know that whenever they read it, they're getting good information about the world? And this is sort of a quote that when Jimmy Wales went to Ward Cunningham, who created the first wiki in 1995, went to this thriving wiki community, the first one that had been working for 5 years, and asked, do you think that a wiki could successfully generate a useful encyclopedia? Ward, the creator of the first wiki and its bust factor of one person, said yes, but in the end it wouldn't be an encyclopedia. It would be a wiki. thinking, and Jimmy Wales basically said, well, that's all good and nice, I'm going to do it anyway. And it worked. It worked for a lot. The wiki model provided a really powerful and fast way to create a good wiki. But then they started to have problems where those two goals came into tension with each other. And when the goals of the wiki and the goals of the pedia come into conflict, which ones do you follow? A lot of bytes were spilled over this, over this particular conflict, and it's something that was at the heart of a lot of different issues that they had to resolve. And so what ended up happening is they sort of, as they were getting more and more members, as they had more and more conflicts to deal with, and as they had this sort of looming sort of ideological battle that they had to resolve as well, they started to do what a lot of societies and organizations throughout history have done, which was to formalize their governance structure in very particular ways. Wikipedia began to look like a very different place. And they did sort of three things that were very linked. They're distinct but linked. So increased rules, increased policies, and formalized bureaucratic processes. And once they had formalized rules, policies, and sort of standardized bureaucracies, they could start to use a lot of automated tools for reviewing and reverting low-quality contributions. Some of these were fully automated bots, but a lot of them were very specialized browser extensions or new parts of the software features that could be used to enforce quality very quickly and to sort of assist in patrolling and reviewing, which was the major time sink for Wikipedians, especially whenever there's that. And this sort of was also linked with a new attitude toward newcomers. The Wikipedia community in its early days was happy and thrilled if someone even just signed up, especially when they were around 100, 1,000 people. There was a point in time when you could go on the Wikipedia mailing list, and there was just one Wikipedia mailing list. And you could say, and you could get the admin password to the server just by asking for it. And the policy was, if someone found the mailing list and they posted to it, well, that's enough good faith effort to give them the password. That didn't last for long, as you can imagine. But that was sort of the idea was, well, if somebody messes things up, we can just sort of recreate it from scratch. They weren't, and we can sort of recover it from backups. It won't be that much of a loss. It shows how different Wikipedia was then and now. So what happened with newcomers is people started to, especially people who were patrolling new contributions, people who were on the front lines, and there would be, all of a sudden, you could see, oh, well, some 13-year-old in their computer lab just told everyone around them that you could edit Wikipedia because now the word poop is coming into articles at a rate of about 30 a minute. We've got to do something about it. And this is, one of these things. You had to, newcomers were started to be seen, by a lot of people, especially people on the front lines, as a problem to be dealt with. It's a source of concern. People who might add, on the one hand, things like vandalism, the people adding poop to an article, but also more insidious sort of things like companies coming in, governments coming in, people, ideologues coming in and sort of messing with and sort of manipulating the sort of, as Wikipedia sort of sloganed itself, the sum total of human knowledge. They started to take this responsibility very seriously and for very good reasons. And and while there's sort of a critical sort of bent to my analysis on this, I want to emphasize that this is a really important thing for Wikipedians to do at this particular moment in time, particularly given that people were, college professors were talking about banning Wikipedia in classrooms and things like this. Wikipedia was frequently just ridiculed, and they wanted their project to be respected, high quality. They had a mission, an educational mission that really resonates with me and really resonated with me as an educator as well. It's one of the reasons why I joined the project. And so on the one hand, they did that. But sort of they took this and they created a substantial amount of policy. This is the list of policies in Wikipedia, not the text of policies, but the lists of policies in Wikipedia, the directory. I had to turn my awesome sort of 4K monitor on its side to take these screenshots. The red is one normal screen. The left column actually is the directory of policies. The middle column is the directory of guidelines. The distinction between guidelines and policies would take more than in this entire talk to explain, but trust me, it's really important if you're a Wikipedian. And then this, on the third column, is an example of one of these policies. You can see this is kind of a sublime text style thing. And this is the policy on verifiability of sources, how to determine whether a source is good enough to be used as a citation or not. There are dozens and dozens of these policies that you have to read. Wikipedians use the term wiki-lawyering to describe some of the work they often have to do. And one Wikipedian who actually went to law school, who I interviewed, told me that it wasn't quite, Wikipedia policy wasn't quite as much as he learned in law school, but it was close. So that's something to think about in terms of what is needed to when you get into any particular conflict in Wikipedia, you might have someone cite one of these dozens of policies at you, and you need to be able to know what that policy says in order to defend sort of the edit that you just made. This is also the criteria for speedy deletion process, which was one of two processes that was created to streamline the existing deletion process. So this is the simplified version of that. It takes up 2 sort of pages in that sort of massive, in my sort of massive monitor. And what it does is it specifies the conditions under which Wikipedia administrators can delete an article for not being notable enough, or not being sort of worthy of inclusion in Wikipedia for a lot of different kinds of reasons. And on the one hand, these policies made things really easy for veteran Wikipedians. The debates had already taken place. You had a whole bunch of things, and you could look at an article, apply a set of standards, and say, that's a CSD A7. You could hand that to another Wikipedia administrator, and they could say, yep, that's an A7, and their article gets deleted. And that's one thing that, if you're on the front lines, if your job is to review, and you're seeing a whole bunch of people who are sort of creating articles about, 13-year-olds who are creating articles about themselves, which anyone can create an article, that's a fundamental tenet of Wikipedia. If you're seeing a lot of that stuff come in, this sort of thing makes sense to you. And as someone who's done a lot of this work as part of my ethnographic research, someone who's sat on the front line, spent hours and hours and hours being one of those people who has had to make those decisions for hours at a time, these bureaucratic processes and rules make sense in a certain way. On the other hand, this is kind of ridiculous, particularly for Wikipedia, especially as the community that's often sort of held up as this example of peer production, as an example of the reasons why we don't need formalized structures, formalized rules, and a lot of other sort of scenarios. You can't imagine how many papers I've read or books I've read saying we should take the Wikipedia model and apply it to a particular domain. I'm not realizing that this entire bureaucratic structure exists on the surface. And so this is one of these tensions that Wikipedians have to work out about. And so in a lot of cases, the sort of more pedia side has sort of made substantial changes, even in the fundamental software architecture of the wiki. So if things like, for example, there was one of the biggest controversies that happened early on was the ability to lock down pages for public editing. Of course, so many bytes were spilled over that particular debate as well, and it ended up being the process where the people on the front line sort of said this is unmanageable. So I don't know if this sounds familiar to any of you who sort of work in open source software projects where you're getting a whole bunch of pull requests that you might have to review, or a whole bunch of people who are asking you to do contradictory things to a particular project. So I'm running a lot of out of time, so I don't want to sort of there's a whole bunch of research that I've done with my collaborators, and a lot of whom have a much deeper statistical and data science background than I have, about how this affected newcomer socialization and newcomer retention in Wikipedia. So, for example, we went and we hand-coded with a whole bunch of other Wikipedians the quality of newcomers, and we found those who are making, we called them either good faith contributions or golden, which means they were completely in line with Wikipedia policies, sort of stellar contributions. The proportion of newcomers who were reverted over time started to dramatically increase. These are people who we use 2011 standards for this and sort of historically reviewed contributions on that. At the same time, you had the proportion of newcomers who were retained, who edited and then were still editing 6 months later, started to dramatically drop off as well, as a lot of these sort of new, and these are the ones who their first contributions were ones that were exceptional contributions as well, not the general population of people, which obviously does include a lot of people who are making contributions that don't deserve to be in Wikipedia. And so one of the second sort of aspects that Wikipedians did that I want to talk about, if you remember, was the automation of a lot of these tools. They built a lot of tools that, because the sort of rules became more standardized, you could have a whole bunch of scripts, you could have a whole bunch of really sophisticated algorithmic processes for helping all the people who were having to review and control all those contributions. One of the things one of the sort of the most influential aspects that this had was the first messages that were sent to newcomers. So this is a plot also from the same research. It's a proportional plot of the first messages sent to new users. And so the area in white represents messages that were sent by a human typing on a keyboard to another human. Everything else is sent by either a fully automated robot or someone using a templated tool where they haven't actually written the message themselves. They've only said this message should go to this particular person. And so what we can see, starting in 2006, really in 2007, and by 2000, it started to pick up. And by 2011, about 80% of newcomers to Wikipedia were receiving their first message from one of these automated systems. And only the ones in yellow that turned to dark green were built to send basically nice messages that you had done a good job. Everything else was a tool built to tell newcomers that they had done something wrong, and often the case, especially in the case of the blue and the red ones, that if they keep doing what they were doing, that they would get banned from Wikipedia. So a lot of the work that we ended up doing was trying to improve the newcomer socialization process in that way, trying to sort of A/B test a whole bunch of these messages that happened, trying to sort of think about how to create new spaces for mentoring. And I want to sort of end with a concept that's been really helpful for us as we've sort of been doing a lot of this work, which is that of legitimate peripheral participation. And this is a concept, it's a theory of socialization that came out of sort of collaboration by an anthropologist and a computer scientist, Levin Wenger. And it talks about how socialization is a staged process of learning. So people go from being a passive observer, someone who maybe have heard about your thing, to being a transactional participant, someone who uses software or reads Wikipedia, a peripheral participant, someone who maybe sort of does a lot of work themselves, but does a little bit of work, but isn't sort of really actively engaged continuously, to a full member who's regularly contributing, to a core member who's doing leadership work. And it's sort of they emphasize the need for to think about four sort of things. One, to have newbies make real, meaningful, low-risk contributions on day one. Creating a new encyclopedia article is a high-risk contribution because it might get deleted. Fixing a typo is a low-risk contribution. So there's an argument that's actually made to not have automatic fixing of typos because that's actually one of the first things that gets people into Wikipedia. So maybe one recommendation is to think about if there's 10 tasks that you can do in an hour, maybe don't do them. Maybe leave it for someone who's newer in the project so that they can get their first entry point in. The second thing that good socialization systems do is they help people connect with a cohort of newbies. And there's been not just sort of mentoring from veterans to newbies is important, but so is peer learning. And so there's been a lot of new spaces that Wikipedians have started to develop to help connect that and connect not only mentors with newbies, but newbies with each other. A third one is that good socialization systems let newcomers observe how veterans do complex tasks. And this extends to the governance aspect as well. About sort of how, in order to, it's really bad for if the first time you do a task is the first time you've seen someone do that task. So providing transparency and providing a lot of those ways for newcomers to come in and to see what veterans do has been recommended. And then also let people gradually take on riskier tasks as they feel comfortable and working alongside veterans. So if there's a complex high-risk task that typically a veteran would do, think about ways for a newcomer to perform some little segment of that task in alignment with it so that they can get a feel of what it's like to rise further in the organization. So thank you very much. I'm not familiar with any that have, but I'm sort of really interested in that because I think there's a lot of similarities. Mm-hmm. There may have been, but yeah. Yeah, that was so this is part of a much larger diagram. One of the things that often happens is that there can be, so this article, Corrales, it's a 2010 article, is about, there's often this sort of there can be a wall between members of the core leadership group and sort of full, regular, active members of that. So it's a semi-permeable sort of membrane. And one thing I haven't gotten to, sort of, if I had an hour for this talk, I'd talk about, that sort of tension as well. For sort of, there can be a tendency for members of a core group to sort of calcify and turn inward, as opposed to, and sort of make it difficult for people to go from full members to core members. And that happens in a lot of projects as well. So so there's been a lot of research on, it's often called the decline, if you would search for it in some of the literature. There's been, a lot of, there's a lot of people who debate this and a lot of people who disagree. My take on it is that it's both sort of a pipeline problem in terms of how many people are coming in. Fewer people are sort of editing, making more than 10 edits as well. But I think it's also one of those. So we have seen a small uptick that started to happen as there's been a lot of these new initiatives, which the initiatives that I've talked about and the policy reforms have only happened in the past sort of year, sort of really taken off in the past sort of year or two as well. But we have started to see a big tick. And some of the more targeted ones, like there's something called the Tea House, which is built to facilitate both peer learning as well, has shown that for the people who participate in that, they have dramatically increased, in some cases double the amount of retention. They make 4 times the number of edits. And as well, something I didn't mention, the sort of gender gap issue, which is something you may have heard of, big with Wikipedians. On average, 9% of Wikipedia editors are women. In the Tea House, that was more than doubled. And so more than tripled. They went from 9 to about 27% of people who successfully went through this program. So.
Somehow the background, educational, and else geographical
Pardon?
of the country. I look at somehow, I analyze somehow the background of the contributors, age, education.
Yeah. So the background of the contributors is there's been some demographic surveys that have been done. The last one was only done in 2012, so it's a little bit out of date. Wikipedia contributors are substantially sort of more educated than normal. A large portion of them are graduate students as well, which procrastinating on our dissertations. But yeah, sort of mostly Wikipedians look a lot like me in terms of a lot of demographics, in terms of where geographical locations. The U.S., the UK, Australia, and continental Europe are sort of the major places as well. And then either are in college or have a college degree, and a lot of them have advanced degrees. But there's the editor demographic survey run by the Wikimedia Foundation that sort of provides really good demographics on that. So. None that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean that hasn't been done. So let's find that out. So. Oh.
Can you comment on what you hope to do in our community?
Yeah. So I think right now I have an N of 1 with Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is very different than open source software. For a lot of reasons, I think there's some similarities. So what I would love to do is to talk to a lot of people who are involved in different projects. And I think that there's a lot of things with different stages, Wikipedia of growth, and to sort of think about who's at what particular stage and sort of what they need. I think the socialization process is one that's very universal to any community, but I think that there are some projects that are maybe more naturally, for various reasons, have a smaller scope and are going to be their maximum number of people is going to be lower. A project like Wikipedia could theoretically sort of grow infinitely, because its scope is all of human knowledge. And so I'm sort of thinking something like a general purpose, something like NumPy is probably going to have a larger number of users based on its scope than a very specific, maybe domain-focused, library or something like that. And so I think that's one thing I'm interested in, is I guess carrying capacity might not be the right word, but thinking about that.